All right, so what we're going to talk about today is the DNA, well, let's go back. It's not, there we go. Is the DNA of modern brands. So we know that so much has changed in the world, but what we really want to understand, if so much has changed for people, then what has to change for brands? How do brands need to think about this new world? What are the new table stakes for thinking about a brand? So at the end of the day, it all comes down to trust. Trust, if you don't have trust, you might as well just like put down your cleats and walk out. But what does trust really mean? How do you earn trust? Well, you earn trust sometimes with functional trust, like, does it work? If it doesn't work, I'm not going to trust you. So if your iPhone doesn't work, if your browser's not launching, then all of a sudden that starts to reflect on the brand. Transactional, is it consistently reliable? One click gets me out the door. I know it's reliable, it's transactional, I love it. I know that my credit card loads. Okay, that makes me trust that credit card because it auto loads and I feel protected by that. I get a code. Does it ethically sound? And we're going to get into this when we actually bring up some of the extraordinary brand marketers, but what do I know about this company? Can I trust this company? Is it morally sound? Do I actually understand where they stand? Are they making a positive impact on society? Some of these things are conscious and some of these are unconscious. And is it relevant to me? Why are they showing me stuff that's not for me? Those are table stakes in trust. And so when thinking about trust, we've always heard the golden rule, do unto others as you would want done unto you. But is that really the golden rule today? It's really about treating others as they want to be treated, not as you want to be treated. So that's about meeting people where they live. And if those are the table stakes, then a brand is not what any of your campaigns say about your companies. It's what a friend tells a friend. And so if a brand is really what a friend tells a friend, then how do you get underneath the architecture of that narrative? How do you make sure that you're in those conversations, because that's where it lies? And so we're going to start with, and this is a very speed talk through a very long deep dive, which I would love to do for you anytime, but we would need way more time, on what are the factors to make sure that you have a trusted brand? What are the factors to make sure that your brand has the DNA to keep up with the modern consumer? Well, first and foremost, it's anchored in purpose and values, because shared values and intentions, they will always strengthen brand loyalty, consciously or unconsciously. Second of all, storytelling. Is your brand telling the stories? People don't remember data. People remember stories. Stories are past. Stories are about survival. Stories are lore. So how are you telling new stories? And what are your communities telling you? Are you listening? Stories are also about listening. And then there's trends and tribes. Things are moving so fast today, and that subcultures and memes and hashtags are actually informing mega brands and movements, and they're changing on a regular basis. So have you actually tooled your team to listen to those subcultures as those trends are coming and making their way into the zeitgeist and having an impact on your brand? Gamification. Gamification is an invitation, it's a motivation, and it's a rallying cry to play, to learn. It's not just about gaming. How many of you here are using Duolingo to learn another language? Very good. How's it going? Do they ever text you and say, like, where are you? Come on, let's go. You missed a few days. The app makes a sad face because the app is feeling sad. So that's like, it's a relational brand. It's gamifying the experience, exactly. So how is your brand leveraging data? Physical commerce, physical, digital. We've always talked about footfall, but you have to think about clickfall as well. And so what is the relationship between footfall and clickfall? How are you thinking about conversational AI? How are you using data to personalize the experience? Are you inspired by marketplaces? Did you know that 60% of Amazon's sales last year were in the marketplace side of their business? So marketplaces are massive. You have to harness the power of cultural trends. And finally, you have to think about the collaborations and co-creations. So at the same time that Crocs is working with KFC, they're working with Balenciaga. Like Gucci and North Face. Thinking about the way in which brands collaborate, the way in which brands share, and the way in which they take the wisdom of their communities. I'm sure many of you have shot on an iPhone billboards clad on some of your buildings. Guess what? All of that was created by the community. There's over 10 million hashtags shot on an iPhone in the hopes that Apple will find me and put my photo in their ads. And so spotlighting their talent, collaborating with brands, mixing it up, borrowing at their equity, borrowing their audiences for a reason, a season, or even a lifetime. And then finally, loyalty. Loyalty is the epicenter. You don't trust a friend that's not loyal. Well, how are you going to trust a brand that's not loyal? And how do you think about that? In the epicenter of relationships, relationships are built on trust and loyalty. And so with loyalty, we have to think about what we call the infinity love loop. So I just told you all these different factors, but it's not about the purchase funnel and at the top. It's about an infinity relationship, because the relationship often begins after the sale. And so understanding that means that you're having friends go bring their friends. You get to know them, and then how do you get them to bring along more people? So once you understand that it's a loyalty love loop, then you realize you're always in relationship. Don't move past that first customer, go deeper. Now you can get to know them. Now you can be in conversation with them. So this wraps it all up. I'm not going to read from these slides, but this is just what I told you, which is what I believe is the DNA of a modern brand. And this is about any one of these factors opens up a world of discovery, a world of creative, a world of data, a world of execution. But these factors add up to what new brands and old brands need to retool themselves, because the new consumer has done that. And so with that, that is a speed tour. There won't be any quizzes, but a speed tour on the DNA of modern brands. And now with that, we're going to hear about 4 companies that are doing an extraordinary job, and the marketers who are leading them in telling those stories. And so Tess and Sarah and Nick and Caitlin, could you join me on the stage here so we can actually hear your stories? Thank you. So we just gave them a speed tour through the DNA of modern brands. But now I'm hoping that you can share a little bit about the brands that you're stewarding, the way in which you're thinking about outdoor in the mix, and the kinds of ways you're bringing your messages, your experience, and your relationships, which is what we just talked about, to the audiences. So Sarah, I was thinking that we would start with you. OLIPOP has done an extraordinary job, not only disrupting a category, creating in many ways a new category, but also showing up locally, showing up nationally, both for the trade as well as for consumers. So I think you can talk a little bit about how OLIPOP thinks about that and the work that you've done around it.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know OLIPOP, we are a better for you soda. So we're focused on having ingredients that support digestive health with 9 grams of fiber, and then low sugar, low calories. So that's just top level. So what we did with out of home and our brand strategy was to use out of home as sort of a baseline that we could plug the rest of the channels in for a 360-degree marketing campaign in each local market that we wanted to go to. And it gives more of a localized element. Like in Miami, we did a beach cleanup. We worked with a local artist in the Wynwood district. You know, we really want to ingrain ourselves in the community to become authentic and a voice and a brand that someone can trust, versus just surface level campaigns. So that was really the baseline of our campaign.
I love that. I love that. And when I think about the OLIPOP, not just going, I love that you not only were outdoors, you not only were showing up at that market, I know you did experiential pairings and other things that were really site-specific and local and culturally specific.
Yep.
And it made me think a lot about the Bombas campaign, because Tess, you know, Bombas is an incredible company. You've sold over 100 million socks, probably more. And it's a 2-for-1 model. So first and foremost, the socks are fantastic. Thank you. I wear them. But what is bigger, and what we just talked about in the DNA of a modern brand, is the purpose and values. And so many people know about those purpose and values, that it's 2-for-1 model and it's supporting homeless. But talk to us about how you've taken that brand ethos and the essence of that and brought it into outdoor and the experience and how it's impacting the brand itself.
Sure. So glad you love our socks. We love you right back. For those of you who don't know, Bombas makes the 1, 2, and 3 most requested clothing items in homeless shelters. So for every item purchased, we donate one. As you mentioned, when we achieved our 100 million milestone, we had 2 questions, right? Which is, how do we want to handle this, right? What message do we want to say and where do we show up? And every brand, when they reach a milestone, needs to decide whether they're going to make it about themselves or they're going to make it about their customer. And we decided that the most impactful thing that we could do for our mission was to actually shift how people think about homelessness. So our only brief, and with absolutely, frankly, no KPI or ROAS tied to it, was to change perceptions around homelessness. So unlike having some strategies that are dictated, we need out of home as part of our media mix, ours instead was creative dictating where we should show up. And because the issue of homelessness is so perceived in dense cities, we wanted to choose a media format that people couldn't look away from, because sometimes homelessness is easier to look away from or ignore. So we wanted to pull out billboards, moving digital, worked with Quan to have an amazing mix of out of home. And we wanted people to be confronted with facts and stats about homelessness, and maybe a few blocks down, even see someone who may be experiencing homelessness and force themselves to think about this issue that we don't talk about, and that's a bit uncomfortable. So we thought it was important to be remembered for that perception shift mentally, as opposed to just for our product. And we have a lot of product-oriented campaigns, but for out of home, we really felt the creative needed that format.
And I'm curious, were you working with various cities and site-specific experiences for helping to deal with this crisis and thinking about where the advertising can be and how can you activate the overall community to support it?
Yeah, so we have a network of 3,500 giving organizations represented across all 50 states, and those are organizations of all sizes. Sometimes what we like to do is take a center's front windows and use that as remnant real estate and put out stats and facts about homelessness. But this campaign was really our first foray in 10 years in out of home. We'd never tested it before, and we wanted to focus on New York City. It's where we're based, and also it was coming out of COVID, big conversations around the status of certain neighborhoods and Midtown, and we thought it was important to really have that confrontation in a very dense city. And now we're going to start to have conversations about what other cities we want to put more localized stats and information and placements into.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's really a great example of not only purpose, but also storytelling and experiential. And so really hitting on all of that is, it's a very powerful mix. And so, Caitlin, in your particular domain, tell us a little bit about prizes and how it works, and then how you think about outdoor in the context of audio, because people may be experiencing audio in their lives while they're experiencing your messages in outdoor. And so I thought it was so interesting how you're combining a lot of that and thinking about your overall funnel and the top of the funnel and awareness.
Yeah, for sure. So for those not familiar, Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports company in America. We also were recently ranked as one of the fastest growing sports companies also in America, so it's definitely an exciting time to work in the space. And we're definitely looking to capitalize on that, and also go out and reach who we need to reach with that upper funnel awareness. I think thus far we've definitely been really focused on lower funnel metrics and lower funnel marketing efforts, but my team is definitely focused on what you just mentioned, so audio, out of home, video, TV, all of that, and how that comes together to really drive our message home. So from an audio perspective, we're definitely heavily invested within podcast, radio, streaming audio. I think there's a really heavy component with influencer marketing too, to cover off on some of the things you noted earlier about trustworthiness. I think that's a big thing, especially when you're putting your money into a platform or an app that you might not be familiar with or have heard of before. I think that influencer component, whether it's a radio endorser, a podcast host, things like that, are definitely critical. And then tying it back to the out of home of it all, we definitely took a media first approach, obviously in partnership with our great partners at Quan Media Group, and definitely wanted to focus on how can we reach our target market when they're going to and from live viewing experiences, because we like to think of ourselves not so much as a daily fantasy sports platform, despite, you know, obviously the category name, which can be confusing at times. But, you know, PrizePicks is definitely something to be thought about as an additive and a sports entertainment platform. So we're additive to your live viewing experience. You know, when you get action on the game, it kind of intensifies that viewing experience a bit more. So that was the approach that we took, you know, finding really, you know, strategic opportunities on those paths to and from stadiums and arenas with a very heavily localized approach, you know, within our top markets and within the state of Georgia, California, and Texas, of which, you know, those 3 states alone make up a significant amount of our business. So I think that's definitely been key for us. And then from a creative and messaging standpoint, a little bit different than, you know, OLIPOP and Bombas. We, you know, did a lot of research where we found that a lot of our customers or our prospects don't know we exist or don't know we're available. And so, like, that was our approach for the creative. We're #1 PrizePicks, #1 daily fantasy sports platform in America, now available in Los Angeles, now available in Dallas, now available in San Antonio. So that's definitely been a key component, and obviously all those channels coming together has been really impactful for the business.
So unpack for me a little bit more about the national where you can, and then the local, and how you're thinking about creative on a local basis to combine, to marry up to some of the multimedia things that you're doing in audio and other places.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So our business is a little bit nuanced in the sense that we're not available in 100% of the states. We're roughly available right now, changes every day, but over 30 states in America right now. So we definitely have a national layer, if you will, with, you know, podcasts, TV, and some sorts, especially in those endemically relevant environments like live sports viewing and things like that, where we can get in and be available. But, you know, to that point, we need the localized approach in those key markets to reach our demos, because we're actually not allowed to, from a competitive and category exclusivity perspective, not available to get into a lot of places where you'd like to see us. So, you know, why haven't I heard of PrizePicks before? I watch Sunday football every week. I'd love to see you in the game. I'm a Giants fan, so that would make my life if I could see that game, because usually the playing isn't up to caliber. But I think seeing a PrizePicks ad would be great, but, you know, there's just some restrictions that are there. So we have to take that localized approach to layer on and reach our, you know, audience in a broad way. It's not one-to-one, it's one-to-many, and that's definitely a way that we try to break through, because we actually can buy there. There's no restrictions, you know, and we're hoping that we're reaching that target that, you know, has a high propensity to convert on their, you know, as they're going about their day in other areas, that, and hopefully they're watching, you know, the NBA games, the NFL games, the MLB games, where they say, hey, you know, I'd love to use PrizePicks. That sounds like a good idea.
That's fun. I love that. So Nick, thank you for indulging me in a ladies first approach. It's a rarity to be able to do that in a conference, so I wanted to fully capitalize on that opportunity, and I knew you would roll with it. So Nick, I love what you're doing with Magic Bullet, and I love the nutribullet approach to what I'll call experiential. But can you talk a little bit about your background, because you've come from some really modern brands, and then how you are applying that at this new platform, and how you're thinking about outdoor as an activation point.
Yeah, happy to. So I used to work at Dollar Shave Club and Sweetgreen, and so my little joke is that I sold razor blades and salads, and now at nutribullet I sell smoothies, which is a salad broken up by a razor blade. So I'm a natural man for the job.
That's what we call a very good collab.
You know, and it's having spent the previous part of my career working on challenger brands, you know, now I'm representing the largest personal blender business in the world. And so I wanted to bring that innovative startup approach to a legacy brand to help kind of tell that story. And for us, you know, we have great awareness for nutribullet, but we weren't top of mind with consumers. And so the thing I talk a lot about is that we're not just competing against other kitchen appliance brands, we're competing against any other fast food that a consumer could get, right? So I'm competing against McDonald's, I'm competing against Starbucks. And so what we wanted to do as part of our brand campaign was to add in a layer of out-of-home to make sure that the brand was showing up in those key moments that really matter, like where the consumer isn't historically thinking about our business, right? They're thinking about us in the kitchen at breakfast time, but not on their commute home. And so also worked with the team at Quan to make sure that our brand was in those key moments. We were on bus shelters in New York. We positioned ourselves, you know, outside of Starbucks restaurants or above Erewhon's, because we wanted to tell consumers that the fastest food that you could make is in your blender in under 20 seconds. So that just helped us make sure that we were kind of penetrating the market, so that we were showing up in a variety of different touch points.
You'll love this example. Yesterday when I was talking about storytelling, experience, and commerce, Mexico City has one of the highest trafficked highways in the world. And so Burger King, which was a challenger brand there, figured this out and said, what if we could deliver them a Whopper while they're waiting in traffic? And so they took the billboards and said, like, hey, Nick in that Chevrolet will be there in 5 minutes. And they have a whole deployment. And they went from being, you know, basically not on the radar to being the #1 fast food app in the region. And so there's a smoothie moment waiting for you in Mexico City.
Done. Deliver smoothies, sodas, and some socks while you're in traffic.
Exactly. And when you open up that market, you know, Lucha Libre, they'll be coming for you.
Oh yeah.
So these are all such great examples, in my opinion, of how y'all are building new types of relationships because you're creating new conversations. Because as you said, it's one to many, but really it's many to one, one to many, and many to many. And so to unlock the many to many, where people are talking about your brand through their own experiences, you need to have all these trimodal ways of unlocking those conversations. So I think we have an opportunity under Anna's amazing leadership to really challenge the industry to say, what can the industry be doing now and next to create the kind of measurement, the kind of platforms, the kind of avails that actually help you? So what are some of the ways that each of you, if you could wave a magic wand within reason, would you like to see the industry continue to evolve?
It's a loaded question.
Well, no, I think that's why everybody's here, right? Because we want to move it forward, and I think your brands are such exemplars for people who are using the medium so well.
I have one. Mine is more creative specific. I think that we need, as marketers, to be a little braver and to take leaps and read between the lines. I mean, I know there's incredible data tools out here to tell us how to measure and attribute our campaigns, but I think we also need to accept that brand is long-term, right? Nike's been building brand 30 years and they just recommitted to investing more in brand, which they cannot measure immediately. And so just being brave and saying we're gonna test really new ways of showing up and optical illusions with out of home and ways to just surprise people and to bring value in our communications. I mean, we have to remember, like, we're showing up in cities where people live and have their lives and are bringing their kids to school, and they're gonna be encountering your ad over and over again. What are you providing them? Are you making them laugh? Are you making them remember something? Are you just like noise, right? So how can we be braver and be comfortable with some of the ambiguity that when it comes to attribution or when it comes to data that can't tell us exactly what someone wants, right? So I don't know who that is. Call me when you figure it out. I don't know, but
No, well, I think it's everyone, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the creative and the narrative and the storytelling and using these platforms, these uncluttered platforms. I mean, if 36 hours are being pushed into 24, multitasking has never been more a thing. And so creative and storytelling stops people in their tracks and gets them to pay attention and gets them to engage. And so I think that is the challenge for creatives, it's a challenge for brands, and it's a challenge for platforms to create the space to do that.
To kind of tail off of that, I think nowadays we're in almost a data paralysis all the time with so much data that a lot of our leadership is focused on the bottom line, focused on, okay, what are the black and white numbers that are going to prove out of home is going to work? But to Tess's point, it's like you need to focus on the consumer and our society that we live in today and the consumer journey, how everyone goes about that day, and that it's not just about, you know, the dollars and cents on a search ad or a social media. It's how does someone consume media all across their consumer journey and trying to decide a product. And then also in today's society, in a world of so many choices where you have Netflix, you have Hulu, you have on-demand content where you could choose the content that you consume, it's so much more important to create content that someone wants to consume from a brand. And marrying the two together of just being right where the consumers are in their consumer journey and their everyday lives and creating content that everyone can relate to, it's so important for any brand.
I totally agree. Nick?
Yeah, I was gonna say I can build off of both of these. I think it's daring creative, and then it's also that spirit of connection. And I think for me, it's continuing to marry the offline and the online. And so we had a very targeted buy that we did, but we made it interactive with consumers. So we did a giveaway and said, go find our billboard out in the wild, tag us in it, we'll send you a blender, right? Or maybe submit a recipe or something as part of the campaign and a part of the creative that we ran. So I think it's making sure you're getting the most value out of your creative, and not just set it and forget it, but make it interactive, do giveaways, use it as a giant sign to give out smoothies and let people experience your brand, and focus really on that connection.
Yeah, so, gamifying it, make it playful, make it social. I mean, there you go. These are all, you guys are posters of all these playbooks. So speaking of games, that was a setup. You guys practiced that backstage. No, but Caitlin, really, how do you think about that in your mix and in your storytelling?
Yeah, I think like what I was just saying to these guys too earlier, like we were launching our first out-of-home campaign. I actually had forgotten about it, but because it was so long ago, but really not so long ago. Back end of August, we were launching our campaign, and before we even launched, we realized, we are very endemic in the space of like hip hop and music and culture, like that's very, very relatable to our active members. And so we saw like we were gonna do a takeover at LA Live, and we knew Drake and J. Cole were performing for 2 nights, and we actually got our creative team to whip up some really interesting and endemic like out-of-home creative, which we got some great POPs of like just everybody waiting in line to get into the concert through LA Live with all the merch stands and everything like that, with our creative, running on 16 or 20 boards, whatever it was out there with that endemic message. So I think it's similar to like what Tess was saying, like, taking those risks and not being kind of scared to reach your target and the customers and speak to them in a way that they want to be spoken to. I think that's something that we do really well as a brand. So I'm excited to continue doing that, and then obviously using out-of-home as a platform to do that is always just an extra cherry on top for that.
Totally. When you think about tribes and trends, you clearly have tribes. You're a tribal brand because of how local and the fan base and the passion around that. There's a stat that 30% of young adults 18 to 35 share memes once a week, at least. And so figuring out the upside down of that, how do you bring that into the conversation? How do you follow the hashtags, follow the tribes, follow the trends? If there's ever a brand that would be about that, that would be you, because of the passionate team support.
Yeah, our team does a phenomenal job with our owned and operated handles and organic social. We definitely are leaned into the meme culture, and like you hit the nail on the head with that one. I mean, there's so much going on, especially right now at the NBA playoffs. I mean, the memes galore for all of that.
Memes galore.
And we definitely leverage that on our platform, and our active member base loves it. So
yes, hacks and hashtags. But you have to really listen, and you have to have a team, and I think you all have hit upon, which is the teams. Your teams have to be agile. Your teams have to be willing to try new things. I mean, hacks and hashtags, if you were to go to an old school team, they A, wouldn't know what you were talking about, and B, wouldn't be able to tool their team to be as fluid. So my last question, and it's a lightning round, is really about AI. Because we can't be at a conference and not talk about AI. That would be irresponsible of us. But in the spirit of agility, in the spirit of having to move, in the spirit of having to put through a lot, I'm wondering if any of you have any thoughts or things you want to share on tools or platforms that you're using. Nick?
Yeah, I think it's about, to me, one of the biggest opportunities that AI opens up for us is personalization. And so also just even from like an email and a digital standpoint, like, to be able to go from a one-to-many to a one-to-one and make a personalized message for people based on their diet or their behavior and kind of how they're eating or what recipes they're looking for. So we're starting to experiment with some of that, and would love to find a creative way to tie it in across everything.
Yes.
Yeah, I've used a little bit of AI too for like the audio side of it, as you mentioned too. Like we need something like super quick turn, like radio scripts or copy points, it's fascinating what can be put together from that standpoint. But yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting component, like added into the mix, and how additive it can be.
I would say it's a good tool in the toolbox, but it's not going to replace the everyday human touch on things.
Agreed.
Like with our creative team, when we worked with Quan to place our buys in Baltimore, like we wrapped a light rail, we had wrapped trucks, and it's like it takes a certain type of person to know, okay, the can is only going to fit a certain way on the wrapped light rail. AI is not going to put the best creative out there for that. So I think we live in a space where it's great to use it as a tool, but have a human touch to everything. Yeah.
Yes, well, the truth is AI is human in that it's large language models that were created by people. And so people need to use that as a tool to actually be more creative, because then you're not labored in all the logistics. You can use AI as a leverage point.
Yeah, I mean, I just echo everything you said. And to your last point, Tina, I also think because it was created by LLMs, right, we have and you know, my legal team is in my ear, we have an obligation of sourcing, right? Like it's a very important to understand when like AI work is not your brand's right? It's not our owned information. So finding tools that are using the tool and not just the learning that is public is really important, something I think all brands and their legal teams are being extremely taught diligently right now.
Yes, and speaking of to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mia.